Although Canada is facing the same deadline that the EU and Japan were facing and all these other countries are facing, Canada is actually not facing the same level of impact. In fact, the impact is substantially lower.
In the high-stakes arena of global trade, where deadlines loom like storm clouds and economic threats echo like thunder, Canada has chosen an unexpected path: silence. As the August 1st trade deadline approaches, the world watches a familiar drama unfold. President Donald Trump's Tariff First doctrine, a strategy designed to bend nations to America's will through economic pressure. The European Union and Japan, under the weight of White House ultimatums, hastily signed trade deals to avoid punishing tariffs. Yet Canada, facing the same ticking clock, has refused to flinch. Prime Minister Mark Carney, with a calm that unsettles as much as it reassures, has steered Ottawa into a posture of quiet defiance, rewriting the rules of engagement in a way that has left Trump's playbook in disarray. The story begins with the Canada-United States-Mexico Agreement, CUSMA, a trade pact that has become Canada's shield in this economic standoff. Unlike the EU or Japan, which face blanket tariffs on nearly all exports, Canada enjoys a structural advantage. Nearly 90% of its exports to the U.S. qualify for tariff exemptions under CUSMA's rules of origin, according to an analysis by RBC Economics. When Trump imposed a 25% border security tariff earlier this year, threatening to escalate it to 35% by August 1st, the move was meant to force Canada's hand back. But the blow landed softly. As long as CUSMA exemptions hold, Canada's economy remains insulated in ways its global counterparts can only envy. This buffer has allowed Carney to reject rushed, one-sided deals, sending a clear, if unspoken, message. Canada will not be bullied into a bad agreement just to make headlines disappear. What makes this moment striking is not just Canada's resistance, but the manner of it. There are no fiery speeches, no diplomatic walkouts, no public posturing. Instead, Ottawa's response has been methodical, almost surgical. Behind closed doors, Canadian officials are poring over contingency plans, scenarios that account not only for industry protections but also for diplomatic and legal countermeasures. Should Trump escalate further? This preparation has imbued Canada with a quiet confidence, a stark contrast to the chaos Trump's deadlines have sown elsewhere. For a president who thrives on economic pain and tight timelines, Canada's refusal to panic is more than a tactical choice. It's a psychological gambit that throws Trump's entire strategy off balance. The EU and Japan, under similar pressure, opted for quick concessions. The EU settled for a 15% across-the-board tariff rate, described by European commentators as more symbolic than strategic, while Japan followed suit, signing a deal under duress. Both nations chose to dodge immediate punishment, even at the cost of long-term leverage. Canada, however, has taken a different road. By leveraging CUSMA's exemptions, Ottawa has turned Trump's August 1st deadline into just another date on the calendar, not a crisis point. This shift has frustrated the U.S. administration, which continues to honor CUSMA carve-outs for now, but finds its threats blunted. When the usual playbook of deadlines and tariffs fails to produce capitulation, the narrative of victory Trump so carefully crafts begins to unravel. Carney's strategy is as much about tone as it is about policy. While Trump's rhetoric grows louder, his speech is filled with promises of American dominance and warnings to wayward allies. Canada's Prime Minister has chosen silence. This restraint is not weakness but a calculated move to seize control of the narrative. By refusing to match Trump's bombast, Carney forces the U.S. president to confront an uncomfortable reality. His threats carry less weight when met with preparation rather than panic. Political analysts have noted this shift, suggesting that Canada's quiet defiance may push Trump to make the next move. Whether that's a concession. To make the next move. Whether that's a concession. An extension or another round of tariffs. For the first time in a long time, the uncertainty cuts both ways. This moment is about more than trade. It's a reflection of a broader shift in global dynamics. Trump's tariffs, announced on what he called Liberation Day on April 2nd, were meant to restore American strength by breaking global trade dependencies and reviving domestic manufacturing. Sweeping tariffs, 10% to 50% on over 100 countries, with Canada facing 35%, on over 100 countries, with Canada facing 35%, the EU 30%, and China 50%, were designed to force allies and adversaries alike into reciprocal deals. But the strategy has faltered. According to Morgan Stanley Investment Management, U.S. companies in Q2 2025 posted stronger than expected earnings, not because tariffs boosted production, because Wall Street had slashed expectations too sharply out of caution. Companies withdrew guidance, fearing tariffs would cripple profits, but the anticipated economic devastation never fully materialized. Supply chains rerouted, cost shifted, and confusion reigned. But the promised renaissance in American manufacturing remains elusive. Industrial growth is sluggish, input prices are rising, and the economic logic behind Trump's approach is under scrutiny. The geopolitical fallout is even more telling. America's influence, once anchored by the dollar, the Pentagon, and a deep well of global trust, is eroding. Freedom House reports that the number of democracies worldwide has declined for 19 consecutive years. A trend Trump didn't start, but one his policies are accelerating.
Longtime allies are drifting away, not in anger, but in quiet disappointment. European officials now openly describe the U.S. as an unreliable partner. Trade talks with the EU have stalled, while Japan and South Korea are forging energy deals with Canada, bypassing Washington entirely. Trump's foreign policy choices, cutting aid funding, slashing international education programs, and rolling back diversity initiatives, have further eroded America's soft power. Trust, once a cornerstone of U.S. influence, is fading, and nothing is stepping in to replace it. Meanwhile, China has seized the moment with confidence. Beijing responded to Trump's tariffs with retaliatory levies as high as 84% on U.S. goods, restricted rare earth exports, tightened import licenses, and doubled down on its Belt and Road Initiative, pledging over $1 trillion across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. With little U.S. competition in sight, China's influence grows, filling the vacuum left by America's retreat. The numbers tell a stark story. China produces 2/3 of the world's electric vehicles and dominates global steel and aluminum production. While Trump's tariffs were meant to weaken China's grip, they've instead exposed how much leverage the U.S. has already lost. Canada's response to this shifting landscape is perhaps the most intriguing. Hit with 35% tariffs, Ottawa didn't just retaliate with 25% levies of its own. It launched a broader economic realignment. Carney's government is boosting trade with Mexico and the EU, slashing reliance on U.S.-supplied supply chains, and fostering regional alternatives. The impact is visible in everyday choices. Tourism from Canada to the U.S. dropped over 40% in June, according to international booking platform SLAMS, and some provinces have banned American alcohol from public events. Canadian consumers, too, are quietly shifting their preferences, choosing local or international alternatives over U.S. goods. What Trump intended as a show of strength has instead revealed a painful truth. Power comes not from shouting louder, but from being needed. And in 2025, more nations are proving they can do without the United States. Nowhere is Canada's resolve more evident than in its electric vehicle, EV, strategy. When Trump signed the Big Beautiful Bill, repealing most federal tax credits for EVs in the U.S., sent shockwaves through Canada's $30 billion EV investment plan, much of which was aligned with the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act. Battery hubs in Windsor and St. Thomas faced sudden market risk, and Honda paused its project for 2 years. The logical move might have been to pull back, reassess, and hedge against uncertainty. But Ontario, Canada's industrial heartland, doubled down. The province, alongside the federal government, reaffirmed every dollar of its commitment, protecting 100,000 auto jobs and aiming to create tens of thousands more. A $30 billion contingency fund, described as firepower, has been set aside to support manufacturers through tax relief and targeted programs. This isn't just about economics, it's about sovereignty. Ontario is making a broader point. Canada offers a stable, rules-based environment in a world of volatile politics. Over the past 2 years, the country has attracted 184 international companies, secured $70 billion in new investment, and created 18,000 manufacturing jobs. As global firms seek alternatives to U.S. policy swings, Canada positions itself as a reliable partner for Europe and Asia, particularly in the EV market. Global EV sales rose 25% in 2024, according to the International Energy Agency, and Canada's federal mandate for 20% of new vehicle sales to be electric by 2026 remains firm. While some automakers push for delays, Ontario argues that abandoning the target would squander billions already invested in infrastructure and production.
This commitment is an insurance policy against Washington's unpredictability, even as Trump threatens 35% tariffs on Canadian goods starting August 1st, unless a new trade deal is reached. Canada's EV strategy remains unshaken. Talks continue, but Canadian ministers admit privately that there's little clarity on whether an agreement is near or far. Yet Ontario's investments are not contingent on U.S. cooperation. If no deal emerges, the transition to EVs continues, backed by funding and political will already in motion. This resolve sends a powerful message. Canada is charting its own course, even under pressure from its largest trading partner. In a world where trust is currency, Canada's strategy is a bet on the long game. By refusing to bend to Trump's deadlines, Carney has turned economic pressure into an opportunity to prove Canada's resilience. The contrast is stark. While Trump's tariffs were meant to project American strength, they've instead highlighted its isolation. Allies are building bridges elsewhere, and adversaries like China are stepping into the void. Canada, with its quiet defiance and meticulous preparation, is showing that patience and trust can outlast tariffs. As the August 1st deadline arrives, one thing is clear. The rules of global engagement are changing, and Canada is writing its own chapter, one that prioritizes sovereignty, stability, and a vision for the future